JT Crowley is Talking Books. On the show, you'll hear from emerging talent and seasoned veterans from around the world.
Hello, I'm JT Crowley, and I have to say I'm delighted to welcome back for a second time Salty Yeom from Daegu in South Korea to talk about another one of his books. He is back. 10 Pieces of Evidence. His first book that I interviewed him for was God's Plan, Alpha and Omega of COVID-19. When I look at this new book Salty has written, I'm still baffled why someone from a scientific background pursues writing religious books. For in my mind, scientists tend to be highly skeptical of religion, preferring proven facts as opposed to religious teachings that very heavily rely on past people's hearsays, theories, and individual beliefs. For me, like the first book, Salty has some intriguing viewpoints, everyone. He really does. Some of which some of you might not quite agree with, but that's your choice. But this is what democracy is all about: free speech and free beliefs. So I think this book, like the first book, has got some very intriguing viewpoints in it, everybody. It's fascinating. It's very interesting. It's short, but to the point. And that is Salty Yeom. He is to the point. So I'd like to welcome Salty onto the show and say, Salty, come and join me once again.
Thank you for having me again.
You're very welcome. So since the last book, Salty, which was God's Plan, Alpha and Omega, COVID-19, what have you been doing, in your own life and writing?
To be frankly speaking, I had no money to write another book. I had no money to interview my book, but I wrote my second book. I am interviewing with my book. It's amazing. It's a miracle. It's God's plan, I think. First, I introduce myself briefly. I was born in South Korea. Do you know South Korea? BTS?
I've heard of South Korea, of course, but I've never been there, Salty.
Okay, I have not been to USA, not been to United Kingdom, but via online, I know where the United Kingdom is. I know where USA is, or you know where South Korea is. Maybe you know about North Korea more because of nuclear problem.
Yes.
South Korea is very small country. 1910 from 1910 to 1945, South Korea, Korea is under Japan's colony. 1950, Korea War broke out. So Korea is the poorest country in the world 1960s. 1960, the poorest country in the world, the Korea. But Korean people, especially South Korean, very diligent. So get out quickly the poverty. But now neighboring powers press South Korea. Still, South Korea is small country, no resource as like oil, no resource iron, no resource, but many people to speak main points why I wrote this book. Like my first book, I had no money. I had no time, but God made me write this book. And I discovered the Bible scripts came true. 2000 ago, when Jesus gathered the disciples before his death, Peter asked Jesus, what is the sign of your coming? What is the sign of the end of the world? Jesus answered, at the time, when I come back, there will be wars, will be earthquakes, will be pestilence. In King James Version, especially pestilence and famine. Recent 3 years, past 3 years, you know, COVID-19, 2020, from 2020 to 2023, and Russia and Ukraine were broke out 2022, and economic crisis broke out. I majored science. I cannot speak something without evidence. I only speak the facts. The Bible prophecy came true. I only tell about fulfillments of Bible script. This is why I wrote my second book, His Back. This is my answer.
Salty, are the two books in any way connected to each other? And are you planning to make this a series of books? And should people read your first book first, or can they read them in any order?
It doesn't matter which book you read first. Perhaps the second book will be much easier to read. It focused on realistic issues. For example, war, famine, economic crisis, pestilence, earthquakes, inequities, illegal crimes, and the amount of a second book is relatively small. I recommend the second book read first. This is my answer.
Okay, Salty. Let's look at the second book, He is Back. Again, it's a short book and it's split into 3 acts. I say parts. And each part, stroke act, you have subdivided into evidence sections, 10 in total. Hence the subtitle, 10 Pieces of Evidence, everyone. But before we delve into the book, I want to look at the prologue you have written. You talk about the signs of Jesus coming, being wars, famines, pestilence and plagues, earthquakes and iniquities. What are you getting at here? For they are the first 5 pieces of evidence you are talking about, which you go into detail further in the first act of the book. What are you getting at?
Okay. Today's date is February 18, 2024 at 8 p.m. in Korean times. First, I would like to say that COVID-19, unprecedented infectious disease, was declared a pandemic in March 2020 and was lifted around May 2023. In Korea, the entire population has been wearing masks for over 3 years. The unprecedented accident. Second, the Russia-Ukraine war broke out in February 2022, and continued to this day. That end, the Israel-Hamas war broke out in October 2023, last year, and is still ongoing. It is considered the largest war since World War II. Third, the global economy is having tremendous negative impact due to COVID-19 and wars. So the problem of hunger, famine is serious, either directly or indirectly. Fourth, the 2022 Turkey earthquake was recorded as one of the largest earthquakes in the human history, with more than 50,000 deaths, and powerful earthquakes of magnitude 7 or higher occurred in Japan in 2020 and 2024, this year, January. All of these major disasters and events have occurred in the past 3 years. This is my answer.
In Act 1, you list the first evidence as war, and you list several wars that have taken place in the past. World War I, World War II, the Korean War, of course, for you, 1950 to 1953, the Vietnam War, and the Gulf War, and the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, which is, of course, a conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and the Ukraine War. Why have you just listed these wars, conflicts from the past and the present? What's your underlying message here?
Just according to the order of events in Bible, Matthew 24:7 in the Bible, war is mentioned first, and as mentioned above, before questions, previous question, I said about this. The important point is that historical events, fulfillments of Bible scripts occurred all at once for past 3 years. This is my answer.
The second evidence you head up, famine. You touch upon all sorts of global events that have taken place and some still continuing to this day. Why are you talking about famine here?
Like previous quests, these global events have always happened. However, as mentioned above, the facts that various disasters and events occurred simultaneously is an important message. In particular, of the past 3 years, the famine economic crisis has worsened due to COVID-19. The Russia-Ukraine war, the Israel-Hamas war, and the US-China trade war. Because of these wars, famine worse. This is my answer.
Salty, there are 3 other evidence sections to this first act of your book. Pestilence and plague, one of them. Earthquakes and iniquities. Why these 3 areas? You know subject matters being talked about here. Are they important to the book? But more importantly, are they important to you?
Okay. In this book, I discuss the pieces of evidence for Jesus' comeback. Among them, the one I want to emphasize the most is the infectious disease COVID-19. The key piece of evidence is COVID-19. I also focused on this, my first book, the gospel and the beginning and the end of the COVID-19, alpha and omega of COVID-19. I focused about COVID-19. In the past 3 years, the number of earthquakes has increased more than ever before, and illegal crimes that were difficult to imagine in the past have increased. First part in my book, Act 1, this book, Act 1, most important evidence, COVID-19 is in Act 1 most important evidence. This is my answer.
Now, in Act 2 of the book, you talk about the evidence by parallel theory. Firstly, can you explain what you mean by parallel theory? And secondly, why have you incorporated the 6th to the 8th pieces of evidence in this part of the book, they being false Christs, which you go into some detail, cross again, and resurrection again?
Have you heard parallel theory?
No.
In movie, have you heard Lincoln and Kennedy related something? Have you heard? No.
No. Tell
Lincoln,
us.
Kennedy. Okay. Parallel theory. After some actions, after some time after sometimes same actions broke out in same way. That is parallel theory. Even in the Bible, in order to gain certainty about a certain sign of belief, it is said to ask God to show it to me twice. God, in Bible, someone asked, pray to God, show me once again. I don't believe that. Show me once again. I witnessed a series of processes that occurred 2,000 years ago. At the first coming of Jesus occurring repeatedly now. In other words, the prophesied Messiah Jesus came again according to God's plan, and although the world is not aware of it, the returned Jesus was abandoned by this generation, like Matthew 24:3-9, a parable about the days of Noah. Do you know parable of Noah? The story of Noah?
Yes.
Okay. Like Noah's time, when Jesus come back, same accident will happen. This is my answer.
Salty, what's your viewpoint on false Christs?
Do you know proverb? There is no smoke without fire. Have you heard?
Oh yes, heard that one.
My own viewpoint on false Christ. There is no false without truth. False Christ made many problems, but to change perspective, there can be real true Christ in the fake Christ, in my opinion. 2,000 ago, many false Christ appeared when Jesus came first. Last year, Netflix aired the controversy of a false Christ in Korea, especially in Korea, becoming a big issue. Past 3 years, especially in Korea, dozens of false Christs appeared for past 3 years. Amazing, wonderful, not unusual. Different other country, especially in Korea, many false Christs appeared. This is my answer.
Now, Salty, in the final section of the book, Act 3, you mention winner who endures tribulation will realize New Jerusalem, the new name of Jesus. What are you getting at here? New Jerusalem, the 9th evidence, you write nothing. It's empty. It's blank. And the 10th evidence, new name of Jesus, is very short. What are you telling the readers, the listeners, the audience here in this part of the book?
It may be hard to believe, but I am conveying a certain message according to the instruction of the living great God and the returned Jesus Christ. God has spoken and unfolded his story through numerous characters in the Bible. For example, Moses, Abraham, Daniel, Solomon, David. God uses characters, people for his making history. Like it is in this era as well, the second coming of Jesus is unfolding his story by speaking through specific people, specific person, and focusing on specific reasons. This part is about this. This is my answer.
Now, Salty, viewers, listeners, and audience that didn't watch your first interview that we did about your book, God's Plan, can you briefly tell us what that book is about?
My first book, God's Plan, Alpha and Omega of COVID-19, is about COVID-19, which will be recorded as the greatest event in human history. I have studied science for a long time, have lived more of my life from non-biblical perspective than from biblical perspective. However, I started reading the Bible in 2008, and while meeting a special mentor, I vividly encountered the living God and Jesus Christ, and this changed my perspective. This is a book that deals with the message of the living God regarding COVID-19 from a changed perspective. This is my answer.
Now, Salty, do you intend to write more books?
My answer is always same. I did not write this book. God made me write 2 books. I had no money always to write. I had no money to publish several books. I had no money to interview my books, but impossible is real. Impossible came true. I don't know my future, but God knows about that. I believe God is life. The Son of God is Jesus Christ came back. This is my answer.
Who would you like to see reading your books?
God sent to masses from Bible scripts. The land here can hear the shepherd voice. The people God make ready can hear, can read, maybe read my book. This is my answer.
Salty Yeom, thank you ever so much for coming on my show for the second time to talk about your books. It's been a huge pleasure. And when you have a look at his books, everybody, yes, he is a scientist, he's a mathematician, he is coming from a very different angle, and he's merging the worlds of scientists and religion. He has his own viewpoints. Some of them you might always agree with, but some of them you might. But have a look at his books and see what he has to say. So Salty Yeom, thank you so much for coming on the show again.
It's my honor.
I'm JT Crowley. Thanks for listening, watching, wherever you're in the world. Until next time, stay safe.